Any problem?
It says 25, 27.
Okay, I just couldn't see.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I have been talking on this book, Opening the Hand of Thought. This morning, I'd like to talk on the second preface. There are four prefaces in this book. And the second is written by myself. The title is Teacher and Disciple. It's kind of strange to talk about my own writing. I'm sorry, but this part is not in that version, Tony. I mean, when Jisho Warner started to revise that previous version and making this version, she asked me to write a kind of an introduction. And I wrote, this is the original draft, about 17 pages about what I know about Uchiyama Roshi's life and my relationship with him as my teacher. And that was when I was still in San Francisco, and soon after I left San Francisco and moved to Bloomington. So while Jisho was working on this revision, I couldn't get in touch with her to work on this book. So I didn't know what she did until this was published. That was after I moved here, that was 2003. And I found she used my draft in various parts of this book. So she cut and what do you call cut and paste. And this part, teacher and disciple, is only small part of this draft. I think it's okay. So in this section, the part in which part I basically wrote about how I became his disciple and what was the meaning for me to be his disciple. Shall I read this? Well, in the beginning, I introduced how I become, how I first met his teaching. The first paragraph is as follows. In 1965, 65 means 40 years ago, 41 years ago, I was a 17-year-old high school student. A friend of mine went to Antaiji in Kyoto and stayed there for a few weeks for a special summer practice period for students. In the fall, my friend told me all about his experience there, sitting zazen, listening to the old priest lectures, and working with the young priest. so there were two priests. He was particularly impressed, my friend was particularly impressed by the way the young priest taught him how to make a fire, to keep the firewood burning well, to heat water for the bath, and to extinguish the fire before the water became too hot. It was his first experience with a wood fire. He learned what being mindful and attentive means. The old priest was Kodo Sawaki Roshi. The young priest was his disciple Kosho Uchiyama. And let me read another paragraph. In June of that year, Uchiyama Roshi had published his book entitled Self or Jiko. I borrowed the book from my friend and became very interested in Uchiyama Roshi's way of life. The next February, my friend had surgery to deal with stomach pain. He had had since the previous fall. He was very sick for a few more months, and then he died. After his death, his mother told me that he had had intestinal cancer, and because he was young, the cancer grew very quickly. This friend's death was one of the reasons I became a Buddhist priest. With his own death, he showed me impermanence in actuality. He was a great teacher and bodhisattva for me. So this friend was my classmate, and we had the same problems, questions about why we have to study. I was not a good student at the high school. I think when I took exam, right after I started to go to the high school, our classroom was next to the tennis court. So outside of the window there was a metal net for the tennis court, and my desk was by the window. And beyond the tennis court there was another building, and above the roof of that building the bird was flying in a morning sun. It was very peaceful, and I felt I was imprisoned. And the bird was very free. And I didn't like that. And the exam was, the subject of the exam was, in English, ethics and society. And in that subject, we studied, very briefly, studied history of philosophy and religions. And so in the first period, we studied Greek philosophies. And exam is, the question was, which philosopher thought what kind of theory? I didn't like it. I was very interested in the philosophy, what they thought. But I didn't like, to make that kind of philosophy as a kind of a tools to judge how to judge my learning ability, to evaluate this person, and the sense that I had that I was imprisoned came from the situation of Japanese education at that time. In the Japanese education system, it was very competitive. In order to go to a good university or college, we have to study very hard. And so we had to study very hard. And unless we went to a prestigious university, it's not possible to get a good job. So what we were expected from my parents and teachers and entire society was to work hard. And to me, at that time, that was in the 60s, in Japanese society, the economic growth was very quick. Japanese, when I was born, that was 3 years after World War II, Japanese people were literally in a condition of starvation. So Japanese people had to work really hard to restore the prosperity before the war. So all people work hard to make Japanese a rich country again. So studying hard, working hard is the only thing Japanese people expect us. And I couldn't find any meaning to live in that way. To me, entire Japanese society was like one big money-making machine. And if and the high school, not only high school, but schools are the kind of a factory to produce the parts of that machine. And if we study hard and went to a good university, then we can be a part of the good part of that machine. And yet, this is a part of the machine. If we stop working, function well, we will be, replaced. And sooner or later, when we are aged, we have to, leave that machine. And, of course, when we had a good job, we could make, lot of money and could have a big house and luxurious cars. But I couldn't find any good meanings to live in that way, because finally, sooner or later, we have to die. And we cannot really, take anything we accomplish within this life to after the death. We have to leave everything behind. So I couldn't really live in that way. And in the high school education, even studying about the truth is used for the sake of production of the parts of this money-making machine, and I hate that. So what I did was I erased all the answer I wrote, and I submitted the empty paper. That was the beginning of my my journey of searching the way. after that, I often escaped from the classroom and went to a library to read books on philosophy, religion, and any kind of literature. So I was not a good student, and I was not happy when I was a high school student. And whenever my teachers asked me to study more, to study hard, I questioned them why we have to study. What's the meaning of life? And not many, actually none of them could give me good answer to me. So I wanted to learn what is the meaning of life, why I had to live, and how we should live, what's the best way of life. And the more I read books at the library, in the beginning my question was very kind of shallow and childish, become deeper and deeper, and finally my answer to this question, what is the meaning of life, was life has no meaning. Then how could I live? Or even if I was not sure even I wanted to live or not, if there's no meaning. So I was questioning everything, and this friend had the same question. So we became very close friend, and as a kind of way to find his answer to his question, he knew someone who went to Antaiji to practice with Shohaku Roshi. So probably the person encouraged him to go to Antaiji. So he went to Antaiji during a summer vacation for a few weeks. And what I wrote is his experience at Antaiji. Uchiyama Roshi, that was 1965. That was the year Shohaku Roshi died. So Shohaku Roshi was very old already, and Uchiyama Roshi took care of Shohaku Roshi. And while my friend was at Antaiji, Uchiyama Roshi showed him how to make a fire, to make a bath, Japanese bath. Today, everything is, gas or electric stove to make hot water. But at Antaiji, we didn't have such a civilized system. So we cooked with firewood, and we made bath with firewood. So, and Uchiyama Roshi taught my friend how to make fire. It's kind of difficult to make a fire and keep, the fire in good condition. And most difficult part of making a bath is, if we keep burning, the water becomes too hot to take a bath. So we should extinguish the fire little before the water become comfortable to be in. That timing is most difficult part to make a fire, to make a bath. So to make a bath is really, how can I say, demanding job. We have to be very careful and mindful and attentive. Otherwise, we couldn't make fire, and fire, become too small or too big, or water become, boiled, and no one could take a bath. So making a fire itself is a good practice of mindfulness. And that was what he learned from Uchiyama Roshi. And when he went back home, the bath he had at home was gas, but he said to his mother that we should have a what we call firewood bath. Of course, it's not possible in the city because it's really not possible to find a firewood. Anyway, that was one of the things I heard from my friend. And he allowed me to read his Uchiyama Roshi's book entitled Jiko. That was his first book. And when I read that book, somehow I felt I wanted to be disciple of this person, even though I didn't know anything about Zen or Buddhism. So my friend and I wanted to go to 5-day session in the fall of that year, probably in October or so. But somehow, because we had some event at the school, we couldn't go. And in December of that year, Shohaku Roshi died, December 21st. And in January, around that time, he said he had a pain on his stomach. And I think in February of next year, he had surgery. I didn't know what was the problem. But he had a surgery and he went back home, and yet he was very sick. And he died in July. When he had a surgery, the doctor found it's too late. The doctor couldn't do anything. So that that fall and winter and until when July, when he died, my life was very kind of intense. I was still having a question why I have to live. And at the time, 1965, that was during the World War, Vietnam War. And on newspapers, almost every day it said bombing by American Air Force, how many Vietnamese were killed. And also in Japan and outside of Japan, there are several airplane accidents happened. One of them was airplane which flew to Matsuyama, that was a part of Shikoku Island in Japan, had an accident, and all the passengers were killed. And that was a famous place for honeymoons. So many of the passengers were newly married couples. Somehow that period of time, I had so many things about life and death. And, within myself, I was thinking whether I wanted to live or not to live. And when he was sick and staying at home in bed, we discussed about the meaning of life, and I visited him a few days before he died, and still we are discussing about the meaning of life. And he was really skinny, and yet I didn't know he had a cancer, so he was dying. So I talk about, I still think life is meaningless and not worth to live. And I remember what he said, that he didn't have enough energy to think about the meaning of life anymore. That was, I think, last thing I heard from him. And a few days after he died, and I heard he had a cancer. Anyway, when he died, I felt I was released from my question whether life has meaning or not, or whether I want to live or not. I found that is happening only in my mind. It's about thinking about life. And the actual life and death is happening outside of my thinking. I really found that reality, and that was really great release. Until then I thought if I thought life is not worth to live, I should quit to live. So I have to make a decision. But I found that I don't need to make such a decision. The meaning of life is not there before we started to do something. That was what I found. So meaning of life is not something already there before we started to live. But meaning is something we have to find by doing something. That was what I learned from my friend's death. And another thing is, I didn't think there was some reason he had to die and I didn't need to die. Of course, there was a cause. He had to die because he had a cancer. There's a cause and result, but there's no reason. He had to die and I didn't need to. That means this may happen anytime to me. And since as he died without complaining, I have to die without complaining. And in order to do so, I found I have to live in the way, I don't need to regret when, I have to die. So I don't have, time to waste. I have to really live, in a fulfilled way. That was kind of a new kind of a starting point, how to think how I should live. And his Uchiyama Roshi's way of life, I studied from his book, was a kind of a model to me. That was one of the reasons when I read his book for the first time, it was very attractive and I wanted to become his disciple. And when my friend died, that desire became really strong. But I couldn't go visit Antaiji until I graduated from high school. And after graduation, I tried to visit Antaiji once. At the time, I lived in Nagoya. And when I went to Kyoto to visit Uchiyama Roshi, but I couldn't find Antaiji. I thought because it was a temple. There's a temple gate, and the name of the temple was at the gate. But Antaiji was a really small temple without even a temple gate. So I couldn't find Antaiji. So I decided to go to Komazawa University to study Dogen. before starting to really practice. Anyway, when I read his book Jiko, or the Self, the most important to me and meaningful teaching in that book was in the next paragraph. It said, I was very fortunate to encounter such a clear explanation of the Zen practice in the very beginning of my practice. Even to a high school student like me, it was understandable. I began to see that this a clear explanation is not in this section, because Jisho cut that part and put somewhere else. That was, where was it? As a part of Uchiyama Roshi's preface, the section of the theme of my life. So I'm going to read this quote from Uchiyama Roshi's first book. This should be where I'm reading now. And I think it's really clear explanation of what our zazen means. And whenever I give zazen instruction, I still use this teaching of Uchiyama Roshi, this example he's discussing. I translated this from the first book, his first book. It said, when we look up, we tend to think that clouds mount up high in the sky. But I read that if we draw an 8-inch circle to represent the earth, so when we write a circle, the pencil line, this line, is the thickness of the entire atmosphere. Does it make sense? The thickness of this line is the thickness of the atmosphere where the air exists. Beyond this line, there's no air. So this is the space. The clouds are just things floating here and there, appearing and disappearing within that thin space. So clouds are only appearing and disappearing within this very thin space. Rain is just something happening under these minuscule clouds, but when rain keeps coming down, we think the entire sky is nothing but clouds and raindrops. In reality, above the atmosphere, it is only as thick as a pencil line. There is always blue sky and the sun is shining. So beyond this line, there is always blue sky and sun is shining. But we cannot even imagine that the blue is always sky. How pitiful we living beings on the ground are. In the same way, we are always covered with dark clouds of anxiety and sorrow, caught up in storms of anger and ambition, encounters with agony and despair. So he thinks, this thickness of atmosphere is the same as the thickness or space of our psychology, in which we have, joy and sorrow. However, the clouds and rain of our thoughts are only happening within a pencil-thin atmosphere. This mental weather is simply happening within our thoughts that seek satisfaction. Outside of that sphere of thoughts, the sky is always blue and the sun is always shining in it. When we can sit immovably like the encompassing sky, we can view and experience storms like pain and sorrow without being overwhelmed. Zazen is precisely the posture of sitting in the sphere of absolute peace of mind. That is like the big sky, in which the many clouds of thought come and go. No matter how much zazen we do, poor people do not become wealthy, and poverty does not become something easy to endure. No matter how sincerely we practice, hardship is hardship. But simultaneously, we are in absolute comfort, like the unperturbed sky. And we do not need to think of our life in terms of difficulty and ease. I think this is very easy to understand example of what is going on in our zazen. And not only in our zazen, but in our life. Until my friend's death, I'm thinking about the meaning of life, whether it's meaning or meaningless. And I thought if it's meaningless, then there's no reason to live, so I have to commit suicide. And if there's some meaning, I have to find that meaning and try to live based on that meaning. So I thought there are only two choices, meaning or meaningless. And depending upon my answer or my conclusion of my searching of meaning or meaninglessness of this life, I have to do something. I think not only about the meaning of life, but whether life is worth to live or not, or whether we want to live or we don't want to, or we like or we dislike, or it's too hard or too easy, or life is really positive thing or negative thing, or whatever. Those things are really happening within our thinking and also our actual life in our day-to-day lives. But according to Uchiyama Roshi, that was things happening only this thin space. And beyond that, there is always blue sky and sunshine. And blue sky and sunshine refer to Buddha's wisdom and compassion, and also the life itself, or the reality of life itself. But within that absolute reality of life, we are always trying to find something positive, something we want, something we think meaningful or valuable. And we want to avoid or escape something we don't appreciate. And our life, because as I always say, our life becomes chasing after something or escaping from something. And of course, that is the way we have to live, because we have ability to think. And without making choice, we cannot do anything. That is another problem. So it's okay to think what is the meaning of life. And yet, important point I learned from this teaching of Uchiyama Roshi is those things happening within this sphere or within our mind is only tiny part of our life. That is our kind of a reaction toward the reality or toward the things happening between myself and other beings within this life. So meaning or not meaninglessness, or like or dislike, or this is positive or negative, is a kind of a reaction from this side toward things happening inside and outside of myself. And of course we have to be careful about those things happening. But if we think that is only reality, then I think we miss the point, or that this life much larger or deeper or even boundless life in which we are living. And according to Uchiyama Roshi and Dogen, this larger boundless life, including this always blue sky and sunshine, is our life, in which we are always thinking, how can I become happy or more satisfied? And that is okay. But if we think that is only meaning, and if we cannot satisfy, we have to die, or we have to stop doing something, is, how can I say, too small. We don't see our life in the context of the larger reality. And our zazen allow us to not see that boundless reality, but thought is still coming and going, and like and dislike is always still there. But we found this is a tiny part of my life. We don't need to make decision whether I have to live or I have to commit suicide based on what I think. But life is much larger. So even when we are very successful and we have everything we want and we are completely satisfied, that is not the end of the life. We can be in such a condition, but it doesn't last forever. So we need to be careful not to think that is the life. If we think so, when we lose that kind of life, we feel, we become opposite, and we feel, life is nothing. Life is too difficult, and it doesn't satisfy me. So it's not worth to live. we think this way or that way. That is, that is how we live based on our karmic consciousness. And what we do in our zazen is not eliminate those karmic consciousness, but we just keep them coming up and go. Just let them come up and let them go. That means at least during zazen, sitting in the zendo facing the wall, we are not, we determined not being pulled by our thought or feeling or emotion, whatever happening within our mind. We don't take action based on those things happening in our mind. But that doesn't mean we have to kill those things, but it's still there. But we are not moved by those things. That is, I think, very special thing we can do. Besides zazen, we cannot even thought of such things is possible, because we think our thought is kind of like a owner of this body and mind. But thought is just a clouds coming and going. So no thought stay forever. Thought is always coming and going. Of course, we have to take care of the thought, but not in zazen. In zazen, it's really safe to let go and just let them come and let them go. And we are not moved by any kind of thought, feeling, emotion, and just sit, just keep this upright posture. That is what we do in our zazen. So our zazen is not a method to eliminate those so-called ego-centered, delusive thought, but it's still there. But our practice is not a method to see the blue sky or sunshine, but our practice is to keep this upright posture in whatever condition we just go through, whether we are in the storm or sometimes we really have a blue sky, beautiful blue sky, and sometimes we have peaceful white clouds floating leisurely. It's really nice. And sometimes the sky is completely covered with clouds and dark and gloomy. But that is the weather. We cannot control the weather. But important point is to keep this upright posture and go through any condition we have to encounter. This is how we can not see as an object, but we can see that we are part of that blue sky and sunshine, even though within our mind, we have a lot of different kind of conditions, like the weather on the earth. Well, this kind of analogy Uchiyama Roshi used to explain what's happening in our zazen, I think it's really understandable, even for a high school student. And I still, use this analogy whenever I give zazen instruction. So since I first read this teaching when I was 17 until now, more than 40 years, I'm basically living, following this teaching. Of course, there are many, I studied more kind of a Buddhist philosophy or Zen teachings. But to me, the very basis of our practice and Buddhist teaching or Zen teaching is this teaching to me. So I think, and I also think, this is a very foundation of what Uchiyama Roshi wrote in this book. And this is a very beginning, original idea of letting go of thought or opening the hand of thought. So I hope this is interesting to you. Any question? Please.
So what section is that in this old one?
I'm sorry, it's not there.
Not even Uchiyama's quote's not there?
No, it's from this part is from
Or your manuscript?
my draft I wrote for this version.
Because I didn't remember that theme and so on. Okay.
I'm not sure, the method Jisho made this book is such a good way or not. Please.
I'm just curious how far the analogy extends, do you think? And on the earth, of course, the sun is our source of energy of life, but without rain, without water, we would all die.
Yes.
Do you think that applies to our mind as well, our meditation? That
I
these
think so.
thoughts and these clouds were dependent on.
Yes. Without thinking, we cannot live. Without delusion, we cannot live as a human beings. And delusion is a very good thing, and important thing. I mean, delusion or illusion, something, our ability to see or to think about something, it's not in front of our eyes. Imagination is a source of vision or poetry or making stories. Without those things, even we cannot, write about the philosophy. So, those thoughts are really important thing for us, like clouds and rain. And clouds and rain is a part of the blue sky and sunshine. That's how we can live. So we have to appreciate. But if we think those, imagination is reality, then we have a problem, I think. Same as, the movie. If we understand the movie is not real thing, the movie can be really interesting and it can be educational also. One movie could change our life. And yet if we think things happening on the screen is real reality, and we start to fight against the person in that screen, then we are really within the illusion, and our life becomes a part of that illusion. So I think that's the point of our practice. So we don't to have illusion or imagination, or even our ability to tell a lie is very important for human beings. One person who is studying the artificial intelligence thought computer cannot tell whether it's true or lie, cannot understand what lie is. Only human beings, even our children, know what is lie, what is true or not. So I think that ability is really important. So we have to appreciate it.